As per usual, folks, before we jump back into our fun-filled and fantastic evening of learning, and it is that, fun-filled and fantastic, whether you agree or not. Any questions, comments, concerns I can go over for you fine folks before we jump into it? You know how we do.
Seth,
Yeah.
I just have a brief question. I was going over some of the material that we spoke about, and my question is, in terms of the test, would that be like tricky questions, kind of like you don't have a license, then you start managing your apartment complex for your grandma, and she gives you an apartment for like $1, so you can live, for $1. Paying rent, he's getting, he's not living for free, but then, is any like gray area where they might throw like curveballs like that?
Yes and no, and here's why. Because while you could call that a gray area, I told you when we're dealing with like the triggers for needing a license, anything of value triggers that, right? Real property for others for compensation. And so even in your example, doing it for $1, I mean, like, arguably there's still something of value there, even though you like paid for it. But to the other side of the question, no, they're not going to do that to you. They will say something like free rent, or something. They're not going to give you a double-edged sword where they're going to say, well, you paid for it, but it was severely discounted. They may say free use of grandma's car. That could be considered compensation. Free stay in an apartment or home, that's compensation. Could be a gift card, could be, money. But so there will always be some type of compensation. They won't like try to trick you and be like, well, you paid for it, but it was discount. They're not going to go that far. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good question. What else? Any others? Good deal. Then we shall jump back into it. Folks, because it's been several days since I've last seen you, let me just recap some of the things and or quiz you about some of the things we discussed. Okay, let's go way back. When you get your license, it is issued, yet again, on what two statuses? Folks, there's a method to my madness. We got to repeat this stuff so it doesn't leave your brains. What two statuses does your license get issued on?
Active and current.
Inactive. Provisional inactive.
Provisional and inactive. Active and current is the only one you can use your license on, right? But when you first get it, it's going to be issued on provisional status. Remember, it's a broker's license. You folks will get the same one I have, but it's a different status than what I am on currently. So you're going to be issued it on provisional status and inactive status. So how do you move from provisional broker to full broker? Folks, pay attention. You see how easy it is to mess this up? I did it in a different order than the time I quizzed you last. I said move from provisional to full broker. And that requires post-licensing. Classes. 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Folks, there's a reason I do this. I know the mistakes you make. I know how your brains try to store this information incorrectly. I've done it enough. So I asked it to you in a different order than I asked it to you last week, knowing that some of you were going to say that. Mean and hateful, I know, but you'd rather me do it now than make that mistake on the test. So how do you move from a provisional broker to a full broker, which is also just called a broker, also called a non-provisional broker? It is 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Folks, can you take those post-licensing classes while you're inactive? Yes. Yes. You can start taking them, I told you, the second your license is issued. When the commission says your license number is 653257, you can start taking post-licensing. All it takes to move from provisional to full broker is 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Remember I told you, now folks, I'm going to reiterate this towards the end of the class, meaning like not tonight, the end. But if I was to give you a test question that says which of the following is true in regard to your broker status, and if one of the answer choices is a broker in North Carolina can move from provisional status to full broker status as fast as they can take those post-licensing classes, that is true. As soon as you can get them done, folks, you could be a full broker in about 2 weeks from the time you get your license if you wanted to. I'm not saying do it, but if you wanted to, you could. What you got, Genesis?
So I have a question. Once you graduate basically and pass this exam and then of course the state exam, how can I word this? Basically, would there be a conflict of interest if you work at a bank and you also find it big to go ahead and become active? Would that be like a conflict of interest? Like, can you, or is that not a problem? If that makes sense.
No, reword it.
Like, okay, so for example, right, I currently work at a bank, right?
Uh-huh.
And let's say in December, I become a professional broker. Did I say it right?
Okay, yeah, you get licensed and become a provisional broker, yeah.
Yeah. Would it be a conflict of interest if I'm working at a bank, but then also find a big and do my 3 classes that I'm supposed to? Or even if I don't do my 3 classes yet, but I'm working at a bank, can I still become active or no? Like if I find a big...
Yeah, so let me give you two, just for funsies, let me ask a supplemental question, but the answer is the same either way. Do you do mortgage lending at said bank? Like you personally? No, then no comment. The only time is if your boss says you can't do that. There are some businesses who will say that you cannot have an active license because of licensing or conflict of interest or something, but there is no law or rule that states that you can't work at a bank and be a broker in general. Yeah. Folks, just a real quick reminder from day 1 of class. Remember, you can only be attending in a quiet, stationary environment. You cannot be traveling passenger nor driver in a vehicle and attend this class. So we will have you just jump back in whenever you get to a stationary environment, if that sounds like you currently. So just as a reminder. So let's keep going with the questions here, okay? So I asked, how do you move from provisional broker to full broker? And the answer was 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. You can take them in any particular order. Now let's ask the other question that some of y'all are so eager to answer. How do you activate your provisional broker's license?
Affiliating with a bank.
There you go. Affiliating with a broker in charge. Okay, somebody to supervise you. Remember we said provisional brokers like training wheels. You cannot operate on your own. You got to have somebody watching you, monitoring you, teaching you, training you, so on and so forth. Now, folks, is there any limit to the amount of transactions you can do as an active provisional broker? No. If you want to sell $10 million of real estate in your first 18 months, do it, prove it. Ain't nobody stopping you as long as you're active, right? You got to have an active and current license. Of course, once you take post-licensing and you become a full broker, also called a non-provisional broker, I keep repeating this because you could see all of them on the North Carolina test. What can you then do? What changes for you, think back, when you become a full broker in North Carolina? Some of these answers are too vague. Nothing, everything, all the things, your name, your status, right? Like, okay, hold on now. I need you to be so specific, right? These vague answers aren't going to do it for me.
LO Beans.
No. LO Beans is the acronym for what is a brokerage activity and when you need a license in general, right? If you list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell, dealing with real property for others for compensation, you need a license. That's where LO Beans came into it.
So nothing changes because you still need a big, right? You still need a big to be over.
You
Because
don't.
then you can't.
Remember, yeah, hold on. You've got to understand that there are so many different nuances to brokerage. You can't say that you have to have a bank. That's not true. Remember what I taught you. When you become a full broker in North Carolina, the second you drop your post licensing classes, you now have the ability to activate your own license without a BIC. And some of you use the term, it would be an independent sole proprietor. You are operating without a firm, right? There's no entity. Remember, we started getting into that confusing concept of sole proprietorship versus entity. So you'd be operating a business through yourself with your broker's license. And some of you are skating around the answer, but you didn't quite nail it. You can have an active license, and you can do real estate, but you can't do three things unless you have a BIC. What are the three things that an independent sole proprietor without a BIC cannot do? So I'm gonna have to like tweak a couple of these things. There you go. You got a lot of stuff in the chat there. Let me tweak a little bit because one word makes all the difference. Can't say everything, but here's the answer. You cannot advertise your brokerage services in any way, shape, or form. No business cards, no word of mouth, no Facebook page, no website, nothing. So you cannot advertise that you're a broker in any way, shape, and form. You cannot have a trust account, and you cannot affiliate other brokers. Them's the rules. Okay? But you've got to understand the way that the test questions are going to look. If I said, Brooks just completed 90 hours of post licensing and is now a full broker, which of the following would be an acceptable business practice for him going forward? BICS could unaffiliate with his firm and operate as an independent sole proprietor is a true statement. That is absolutely a true statement. If the question's not asking you about advertising, don't put it in there, right? Never put anything in the question that's not there. Can Brooks be an independent sole proprietor as a full broker? Yes. Point blank period, yes. If the question is, what can't Brooks do? Advertise, have a trust account, or affiliate other brokers. Is everybody with me? You've got to be very careful with things like everything but. I told you there's very few absolutes, and you've got to understand that there is always some minor detail that changes the answer to the question. Some minor detail. So you got to be very careful, and you got to start training your brains with this stuff. What you got, Bree?
I don't know if you already went over this or if I may have forgotten it. When you talk about having a trust account, can you just give some context to like what the trust account is for as a full broker?
I will give you a very short bit of context because we will go over trust accounts in detail later. A trust account is a bank account where you hold monies belonging to other people. That's it. So a lot of times in real estate transactions, there will be things like earnest money deposits where a third party will hold this money on behalf of the two parties. That would be a trust account. And so it has to be separate than our personal bank accounts. It has to meet certain laws and rules in North Carolina. It has to be an on-demand account. And we're going to talk about all the things that it has to be later. But that's what a trust account is. An account to hold monies belonging to others.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Hold on. Before I get to Sergio, where'd you go? Tara, you had a question. Nope, you changed your mind. Okay. All right, just making sure. I don't want to forget you, Tara. What you got, Sergio?
So just say like you get your full brokerage, and you said we can't advertise or anything. So what would be the purpose of doing that, and why should I have to always be affiliated with another brokerage to do it if I'm trying to actually open up my own brokerage at some point?
Excellent question, and I will give you a multifaceted answer. Let's answer the first question. Why would anybody do that? Sergio, imagine you go through this class, imagine you get your broker's license, imagine you join a firm, imagine you do real estate for 2 years, and you wake up one day and you look at yourself in the mirror as you're getting ready to go hold an open house on the weekend, and you look at yourself and you say, oh, this really sucks. I thought I was going to like real estate, but this blows, right? I hate it. Well, you work so hard to get your license, you put 2 years into it, Sergio. Don't let your license go. Change to an independent sole proprietor. And if somebody calls you up randomly while you go do something else in your life and says, Sergio, can you help me buy a house? You sure can. because you are an active broker and you can help them buy the house even though you're not in the MLS or affiliated with a firm, and you can be paid a commission. Or let's say that you don't want to help somebody. They call you up and they say, Sergio, can you help me buy a house? And you said, listen, I left that in the past, but I still got my license. I can refer you to somebody else and I can get a referral fee and you can get mailbox money, Sergio. And they ain't nothing sweeter than mailbox money. You know what it's like to just wake up one day and have a check in the mail for $4,000 or $5,000? It's sweet, Sergio. It's fantastic. Okay, so there's your first answer. Why would anybody do that status if they're not as active in it anymore and they just want to collect referrals or unsolicited buyers? Now, the other question, you said, well, why do I have to stay affiliated with a BIC forever if I'm trying to start my own? Sergio, you don't. You just have to hit the threshold where you can be your own BIC. That's it. Remember, I told you, I was an independent sole proprietor for 2 years, and I could do everything that a firm could do. Why? I was a BIC. And so I was the BIC of my sole proprietorship, and as such, as a sole proprietor, BIC, I could advertise, I could affiliate with brokers, I could have a trust account. Bam, that's it. And so the last piece, if you don't like that, tough cookies, because this is a hard business and you need to learn it, which is why right now the way it sits is you've got to have 2 years of full-time experience in the past 5 years to be a BIC. And so it's good to learn it because it's very easy to make mistakes in this industry. Now, if you still don't like that, Sergio, understand that you could have a sole proprietorship and hire some schmuck like me to be the BIC of your sole proprietorship and still run your own thing. Doesn't have to be you. You could hire one or create a firm and do it that way too. So there's options, right? Because I know everybody's always interested about like, well, I want to go out on my own. Sure, you can, but you also have to understand the laws and the rules and the things that lead up to that. So that was a good question. Genesis, what you got?
I just love how I don't unmute myself, just lower the hand and start talking.
You know, I mean,
but with that, so what about retail wholesale? Would that kind of fall under that whole not being a part of a big or no?
yeah, we're not going to get into, let's not talk about it. It's just, that's one of those things I'm going to table. It's not going to be on your test. It's not something that we need to discuss. It's just going to confuse you. We can have that conversation in post-licensing once you get your license, but yeah. So my last question that we kind of segued from was, do things change when you become a full broker? The answer is absolutely yes, right? Because you could be independent at that point, an independent sole proprietor and operate without a BIC. Of course, then we talked about BIC eligible. We talked about other things. Folks, when do you have to start taking CE in North Carolina? Once you get your license, when do you have to start taking CE?
The following year, the first.
Second renewal year or after you have renewed once. Both of those are true, right? You do not have to take it in your issuance year, but it's not a calendar year. Remember, our years run July 1 to June 30th. So you folks, remember, will have your issuance sometime around December or January. And so you will be in your issuance year, and you will renew your license for the first time on June 30th, which means none of you are going to have to take CE prior to June 10th of 2025. None of you. But after you've renewed your license for the first time by June 30th, remember, currency keeps you current. Failure to pay expenses makes you expired. So when you pay your renewal fee by June 30th, and your license is reissued, as they say, in your second renewal year, that's when CE starts, during your second renewal year, as a lot of you said in the chat. And so all of you will have to take CE prior to June 10th of 2026. But you will all have to renew your license, $45 by June 30th of 2025. Everybody with me? And then remember, CE is comprised of 4 hours of update, 4 hours of elective. If you're a full broker, provisional broker, the update is called GenUp. If you're a BIC or BIC eligible broker, the update is called BICUp. Not to be confused with the 12-hour broker in charge course, but we'll talk about that later. So let me move forward a little bit. That was just a quick little recap of like some of the really early night 1, night 2 stuff. Folks, what is an appurtenance? Don't give me an example. I mean, I guess you can give me an example, but what does it mean? What does that word appurtenance means? What did I tell you to think? There you go.
Goes with the land.
There you go. Runs with the land. Okay, something that runs with the land. Now give me some examples of some appurtenances. Well, give me some examples we talked about last week.
Water rights, fixtures.
Water rights, fixtures. improvements, air rights, easement. Yep, there you go. All of those are absolutely appurtenance. Leases would be appurtenances. Of course, there are some other things that we haven't gotten into just yet, but we'll get there as time goes on with some of the financial aspects of it. So there was another word that I threw out, and I said don't confuse them because some appurtenances are these, and some of these are appurtenances. And who remembers that word that I threw out? There was some kind of burden or limitation. What word was it? There you go. An encumbrance. An encumbrance. There you go. Some type of burden or limitation. We're going to get into that a little bit more as time goes on. We'll talk about some different things within there. And so let me just throw one other thing in the quiz, and then we'll kind of get to where we're at, and I'll kind of recap where we left off. When we were dealing with appurtenances and we talked about water rights, what were the two main categories of water rights?
Non-navigable and navigable.
Those are subcategories. The two broad categories are littoral and riparian. And so when we're dealing with riparian, what type of bodies of water are we talking about in general? Yeah, rivers, lakes, streams, ponds, things of that nature. And when we're dealing with riparian rights, that's when we break them into those categories that we just said, right? The navigable versus non-navigable. So if we're dealing with riparian rights of a pond, a creek, a stream, something like that, and it's a non-navigable body of water like I just named, where does the ownership go?
Up to the water's edge only.
Talking about the non-navigable.
Oh,
That one goes where?
that one's with navigable.
Yeah, there you go. So when you're dealing with non-navigable, you own into the water. A lot of you are saying like halfway in. Absolutely, right? If a pond is bordering two properties, you would own half the pond, they would own half the pond. If the creek is, you don't have the creek, they don't have the creek. Now you can't do anything to destroy the use of the other parties, right? But you can put a dock on your side, you can use your side, you can fish on your side, everything like that. So that's really how it's going to be tested. They always love to say creek runs between a property line. You own halfway in. You own the dirt beneath the water and the water itself. So then, if we're dealing with navigable bodies of water, the Neuse River, the Cape Fear River, things of that are traversable, that's where it goes only to the edge of the water. You do not own into the water. Remember, think driveway versus highway, okay? If it's a non-navigable thing like a driveway, you do own it. If it's a highway, like a river, water highway, you don't own it. So you only own to the water's edge. And then, of course, littoral was your oceans, your bays, your sounds, things with a tide. And where did the ownership go on a property adjacent to littoral water rights? Where was the ownership?
High tide mark.
The average high tide mark, also called the mean high tide mark. And so everything below the average high tide and low tide, there was a word for that. What do we call it?
Foreshore.
There you go, foreshore. Not to be confused with for sure. And so that is public. Everybody has the right to access that, everything below there. So then we got into where we left off. And oh, did y'all love it so much. Everything about it, it was just screamed excitement. I could tell that you were all just absolutely in love with all the estates conversations. Nobody hated it at all. You said, please, sir, may I have another? Right? And I said, no soup for you. And then you had to leave on Wednesday. Now here we're back. So what does the word estate mean? Just the word estate. What did I tell you to think when I say the word estate?
Legal interest.
Yeah, what kind of relationship or legal interest do you have in a property? And so we divided those estates into two main categories. What were the main categories? The very tippy top of that chart that we looked at.
Freehold and non-freehold.
Non-freehold.
Freehold and non-freehold. And so what type of estate is freehold? What is that? Ownership. An estate of ownership. Your relationship is that of an owner in some way, shape, or form. And so that means non-freehold are estates of what? Leasehold. Estates of lease, also called leasehold estates, meaning you do have a relationship but not as an owner, right? We can all agree that somebody renting and somebody owning both have some type of interest or relationship to the property. And so when we were looking at the freehold estates, we had this fun-filled chart that drifted down. And so if I said fee simple absolute, you would tell me that means what?
Highest and best form of ownership.
Highest and best form of ownership. There are no restrictions on time and no restrictions on use, at least to the extent that you would lose your ownership. We're not saying there's no restrictive covenants. We're not saying there's not zoning issues. There always are. But we're saying there is no restriction on time, no restriction on use that would ever destroy your ownership, right? You own it until you don't want to own it anymore, whatever that looks like to you. Also, remember on the test, if you see fee simple or fee simple absolute, they are synonyms. They mean the same thing for test purposes. So then, when we said that we were limiting the use of the property, not the time, but the use, what was that category of freehold estate? There you go. Fee simple defeasible, also called qualified fee. And those root words help you out, right? It sounds like defeat or it sounds like qualify. You have to qualify for your ownership, or if you don't play your cards right, you could defeat your ownership. What were these subcategories of defeasible?
Determinable and subject to condition.
There you go. Fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to a condition subsequent, which is the slide we have up on the screen right now. And what did determinable say?
You can only use it for like one thing.
There you go.
Break the rule, it goes back to the grantor.
There you go. Fee simple determinable, it's yours so long as you only ever use it as this one thing. And the example we kept using was a horse farm. The other thing that was kind of unique, as you just pointed out, with determinable, if you stop doing that one thing, it is said to automatically revert back to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. It's gone. And that led us to this other one right here, and this is the slide. So the other one was fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. It's a mouthful, sometimes it's called subject to a condition. And it says do whatever you want as long as you don't do this one thing. And so the key difference there, when we talk about this one is not automatic reversion. If you stop using it for the one, or if you break that one rule, the grantor or the grantor's heirs could take you to court to regain ownership. It's not automatic there. So those are, of course, testable in their own right. What were the other freehold estates that we talked about? What were the other ones that fell under the estates of ownership that limited time? What were those? Yeah, life estates. What were the two types of life estates that were the most testable that we talked about?
Conventional and legal.
Legal kind of is one that you're going to read about in the textbook. Not nearly as testable in North Carolina. I don't want you to focus on that one right now. There you go. The other name that I do want you to focus on is the Per Ultra V. The Per Ultra V. And so how does a conventional life estate work? What makes something a conventional life estate?
You own it if you're alive.
There you go. When we're dealing with life estates, there are two significant parties. The life tenant, the person who owns it, and the measuring life, the person who is the unit of measure. And what's unique about a conventional life estate is that the life tenant and the measuring life are the same person. You own it so long as you are alive. Well, folks, can you will a conventional life estate?
Nope.
No. Because when does a will kick in? When you die. When does your ownership stop? When you there you go. You see, it never. That is the only freehold estate that is never an estate of inheritance. You cannot will a conventional life estate because it's only yours so long as you are alive. And the second you die and your will kicks in, it's not yours anymore. Well, what was unique about the life estate Per Ultra V?
Inheritable.
Hmm?
The measured life and life tenant are two different people.
There you go. The life tenant and the measuring life are two different people. Cheyenne, you own this so long as Seth is alive, right? Cheyenne is a life tenant. I'm the measuring life. Folks, as the measuring life, do I have any ownership interest in this property? No. Folks, you could make it Jim Carrey, right? Cheyenne, you own this long as Jim Carrey's alive. They don't need to know their unit of measure. It's just this person is a unit of measure. They do not have an ownership interest. Now, we also had another big conversation, and these arguably apply to a lot of the different things we're discussing, but they're more often referred to with these life estates, and that is with remainder or reversion. And so I keep using this word reversion. Reversion means it goes back to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. And as I said, this works with everything. If you have a fee simple determinable estate and you stop using it as a horse farm, it reverts back to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. Well, the same thing is true of conventional life estates. If I say, Savannah, you own this so long as you are alive, and I gave it to you, if I don't name somebody else for it to go to when Savannah's life estate ends, it will revert back to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. This is automatic unless you put language in there otherwise. And so the other option is naming what we call a remainder interest or a remainder man. In other words, a third party it goes to when this interest ends. And so if I say, Savannah, you own this so long as you are alive, and when your conventional life estate is up, it goes to Donna. That would mean that Donna is the remainder man. It's set to go. Now, while Savannah is alive, does Donna have any ownership of this property? No. But can we all agree that if Donna lives longer than Savannah, she will eventually have an ownership interest in this property? Can we agree on that? Because if she's named her to go to. So we call that a estate in remainder. Because that word estate means what type of legal interest. If you're a remainder man on a property, you have what's called an estate in remainder. If you were in a scenario where you were the person where it would revert back to, that's called an estate in reversion. Because if certain things happen, you would have a relationship again. But remember what I told you. The life tenant and the remainder man are different people. Okay? Don't confuse them, because when we add in that third person, people have a tendency to get confused, thinking, oh, well, this is the remainder man. That got to be very careful. So let me give you some examples here with these conventional life estates to kind of spark your memory. These are, I guess, the life estates in general, not just conventional. The conventional life estate, life tenant, measuring life of the same person, they are never willable. Life estate per ultra B, the life tenant and the measuring life are different people, and they could be willable if the life tenant dies before the measuring life. Now, the other unique thing we talked about with life estates is you are an owner. Okay, you can sell it, you could rent it, you could take out a loan against it, right? But the way that these are worded, folks, and I think it's going to come up in a slide in just a second, when you own a life estate, you're not allowed to do anything that would waste or destroy the property, because you will not own it forever. However, what they say is you are allowed to use the resources on the property for the benefit of the property. In other words, if you have a property in a conventional life estate that's got a lot of timber, could you clear cut it and take the profits? No, that would not be lawful. Could you cut some timber to help pay for the maintenance of the property? Yes. And that is, there's a vocab word for that. The vocab word is estovers. See if I can put this on the screen here. Like I said, I can't remember if it's in my slides in a second or not. Estovers. It's a funny word. It's just using the resources on the property to help maintain the property. Not for profit or personal gain, but for the actual maintaining of the property. What you got, Brooks?
So you said that the person could not clear cut the property and receive the profits, but if they wanted to cut some of the trees down and use those profits to maintain the estate, that was allowed.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Seems to me that's very ambiguous.
It very much is. which is why you may want to make sure that you are very clear on the documentation of the deed whenever you give this to somebody if you've got concerns about that.
And you said that this was in which of these subcategories?
Technically both.
So it could be either in the conventional or the per ultra V's?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where you just gotta take some of this with a grain of salt, because obviously you understand the level of complexity that can come into this if you're giving somebody ownership, but it's a timed ownership, because there can be issues that arise and people not doing what they're supposed to do, and that typically involves court and going after people. Of course, the best thing you can do is make it very clear on the deed, but we don't need to get into quite that level of detail for the sake of this class. It's just knowing what they are and that these things do exist. And so understand that you are an owner. Now this is the kind of clarity I said before. Don't get so caught up on the word like life tenant. Technically, everybody is referred to as some type of tenant. It's just it's a weird legal jargon that they use in real estate, even in ownership. And arguably, I think it comes down to the fact that nothing is forever. Even though you may be an owner, you are sometimes referred to as a tenant. And you'll see that in just a second when we start talking about concurrent ownerships. We'll call them tenants in common and tenants by the entirety. So don't let that word tenant confuse you. You are an owner, albeit for a period of time. So as I clarified with these life estates, measuring life and the life tenant could be the same people, which would be a conventional life estate, could be different people, which would be the life estate per ultra V. So let me quiz you here and make sure you're understanding what's going on with these. So here's the scenario. Mark owns the property until he dies, and then it will go to Megan. Let's answer the question first. Is this a conventional life estate, or is this a life estate per ultra V?
Ultra V. Ultra V.
It's conventional. Mark owns the property until Mark dies. Don't get confused because there's another name in here. Who is the life tenant? Mark. Who is the measuring life? Mark. It is a conventional life estate. The second question is this with a remainder interest or reversionary interest?
Remainder.
It's remainder. We have named a third party for it to go to at the end of that life estate. Everybody see what's happening here? Mark is the life tenant. Mark is the measuring life. So it's a conventional life estate. And we clearly name a third party for it to go to when that life estate ends. That person's a remainder man. So this is with remainder. Let's try another one because these get confusing.
Okay, so who was the first person in that example? Because you have Mark and you have Megan.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily, if we're clearly naming somebody, that means remainder, because reversion's automatic. So if we said nothing, then it would go back to the grantor. Who is the grantor? Doesn't matter, but it would go back to the grantor or grantor's heirs. If you're specifically naming somebody, that means it's with remainder.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's another one. Batman owns the property until Robin dies. Is this a conventional life estate or a life estate per ultra V?
For Ultra V.
Per ultra V. Because Batman is the life tenant, Robin is the measuring life. They are different people. That is a per ultra V. Is this with remainder or reversion? There you go. It has not clearly named somebody for it to go to, which means it's automatically going to revert to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. Who is that? I don't know. Maybe it's Alfred. Maybe it's his parents. I don't know. Okay? Listen, Batman's parents are dead. If you spoiler alert. I don't know if you know this. All right, but it's true. So this is with reversionary interest. Let me give you one more here. Samantha owns the property until her sister dies. At that point, it will go to Microsoft. First things first, is this a conventional life estate or a life estate per Ultra V? It is a per Ultra V. Folks, if you're confused about this, just say it out loud. Who is the life tenant? Samantha, because it says Samantha owns. Who is the measuring life? Samantha's sister. They are not the same person. Life tenant, measuring life, different people. That means it is a per Ultra V. And so is this with remainder or reversion?
Version?
We have specifically named a party for it to go to after the end of this life estate. So this would be with remainder. What you got, Brooks?
So, okay, I think it just clicked for me. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. So, conventional life estates, you are the owner is the measuring life, correct?
Correct. The owner.
Whereas per Ultra V is a third party is the measuring life.
Don't say third party, just say someone else, because you're going to confuse yourself, because in this scenario there is a third party. That third party is the remainder man. So the key is, you said it right the first time, in a conventional life estate, the life tenant, meaning the person who owns this life estate, and the measuring life are the same person. So if we said Samantha owns the property until Samantha dies, that'd be conventional. And so in a per Ultra V, the life tenant, Samantha, is different than the measuring life, Samantha's sister. And so in the life tenant and the measuring life are different people, that is a per Ultra V. It literally translates to for the life of another. And then the third party in this one is who's it going to go to when this ends. So what's going to happen is when Samantha's sister dies, Samantha no longer owns this property, and then it will go to Microsoft. And so Microsoft is a remainder man, a named third party who gets the ownership interest thereafter. And so anytime we name a specific person for it to go to at the end of the life estate, that's with remainder interest. And if we don't name somebody, it will automatically revert to the grantor or the grantor's heirs. Doesn't matter who they are.
So, reversionary is always heir property. Nope.
Reversionary means we didn't name somebody for it to go to. And so let me just give you an example, Beverly. If I give you a property and say, Beverly, you own this property so long as you are alive. And let's say that 3 weeks from now, God rest your soul, you get hit by a bus. Like, Beverly, I'm trying to teach you a lesson here, okay? Don't walk in front of buses and you'll be all right, all right? It's going to go back to me because I didn't name anybody for it to go to. So that's a reversionary interest. And so you can't necessarily call it heir property because it's going straight back to me, not my heirs. Now, if I was dead, my kids would get it. So you can't say always heired property. It just goes back to the person who gave it to you. Or if I'm dead, my next of kin. My heirs or assigns is what we call them.
Okay.
Yeah. And yes, if we don't name a third party, reversionary interest is the default. Yeah. What you got, Donna?
So, Seth, on the test, will it be scenarios like this that we will need to answer?
Yeah. Let me give you an example. Let me try to turn this into a test question for you. Samantha has been granted a property that she will own until her sister dies. And Microsoft is named as a remainder man. When Samantha's sister dies, well, let me rephrase this because this one's a little bit more tricky. And I want to show you a real example of what's going to... For this one, it's going to say when Samantha's sister dies, what's going to happen to the property. And so you're going to answer, it's going to go to Microsoft. Another way the question could be spun is this scenario, but then Samantha dies, and Samantha leaves in her will to leave the property to her sister. And it's going to ask you who will own the property. And your options are going to be the state, Microsoft, Samantha's sister, or John Doe. And the answer is going to be Samantha's sister, because this is willable. A life estate per ultra V can be willed. So long as the sister, the measuring life, is still alive, it's still Samantha's to own, but Samantha's dead. Does that make sense? So these are almost always going to be about wills, because they're going to say, here's the structure, somebody died, they tried to do this, can they do it? That's how these are all going to be structured more than anything. And you have to tell us yes or no, right? And so if it was going back to a conventional life estate, Samantha owns the property so long as Samantha is alive. When Samantha dies, she leaves it in her will to her firstborn son. Which of the following is a true statement? Samantha's firstborn son will get it. Samantha's firstborn son will not get it. The state will get it. Or, Samantha is a zombie and eats brains. I don't know. I'm just getting a little extra here. And you're going to have to know that Samantha can't will it. And so it will go back to the grantor or the grantor's heirs unless we state something otherwise. You with me?
But the question would need to state up front the concept of conventional perjury.
It's not going to necessarily use those words.
Right, but the concept.
Yes, the concept would have to be there. So in the example I just used, I did conventional. Samantha owns it so long as Samantha's alive. She dies, and in her will, she tries to leave it. What's going to happen?
Conventional, not willable.
Yep, there you go.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, for sure.
That's helpful.
Raphael, what you got?
Yeah, thanks. So basically, from my understanding is that reversionary is when the property or the estate is left without any instruction. So it goes back up to I think the fifth, not fifth generation, but like someone who's related to that person.
No. Don't go there. You're confusing that with the law of intestate succession. And so reversion, Raphael, I give you a property and you own it so long as you are alive. And let's say, just like I did to Beverly earlier, 2 years from now, I'll give you a little longer because Beverly was super offended, okay? I'll give you 2 years from now. 2 years from now, you kick the bucket. It's a horrible accident, okay? We're knock on wood. It's just for educational purposes. It's going to go back to me. Reversionary does not mean my fifth generation. It doesn't mean it. This is what I just said for Beverly. Don't automatically assume that like my niece's nephew's grandson's sister is going to get it. If I'm still alive, it comes back to me. I gave it to you so long as you were alive, and I didn't name somebody for it to go to. When your ownership died, when you died, it goes back to me, the grantor. That's the give-or of the property. Does that make sense? It would only go through what you're talking about if, number one, I was dead. Number two, I didn't have a will that clearly stated who got it next. And then it would be divvied out under the law of intestate succession, where they would give it to my next of kin based on the categories that you're saying. And there's actually like 7 degrees in North Carolina. If you're married, it's your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, it's your kids. If you don't have kids, it's your parents. If you don't have parents, it's your siblings. If you don't have siblings, it's your, nieces and nephews. And if you don't have that, it's a cousin. And that's as far as it goes. It's something like that. Do you need to know that for the test? No. Does that make sense?
Okay, and let's say in this specific case that it kind of chases like a relative. Is that a reversionary or not?
Yeah, and this is why I'm using the very specific language. It reverts to the grantor or the grantor's heirs.
Okay.
If and only if the grantor is dead. If the grantor is dead, it will chase the grantor's heirs up to a certain level. There you go.
Thank you.
For sure. Now, this is where I'll remind y'all, folks, is this like an ungodly amount of test questions? No. But the more you get exposed to this stuff, the more you see some practice test questions, the better this will seem, right? Because I know last week some of you are just like offended that I even taught you this stuff, right? We'll just say it that way. It's not terrible. It gets better, I promise. It's just an abstract concept because you're not used to it. It's such a weird thing. What you got, Bree? You're muted, I think.
There we go.
There you go.
So the remainder and the reversion people, are they also getting a conventional? I mean, like the same life estates, or is it going back to the fee simple absolute after that?
Adult diapers. It's whatever you pay. So if you don't clarify, they'll get fee simple absolute. Right? When it goes to the grantor, the grantor's heirs, they're getting fee simple absolute. And remember, kind of the story I gave you about the Dorothea Dix property. They messed up, and so it reverted back to the Dix estate as fee simple absolute. And then going back to what Raphael said, the Dix family was dead, and so they tried to give it to this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. None of them existed. And so the government, the state, took it as fee simple absolute and was able to sell it back to the city of Raleigh as fee simple absolute. But when you name a remainder man, you could put it that this person gets it as a successive life estate, another conventional one. You could put 20 life estates in a consecutive order if you wanted to. This would all be outlined on the deed. And if you don't name it, the reversionary would be fee simple absolute. And if you do name it, it would be whatever you state.
Yeah, the original owner has to determine that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The person who set up this life estate. Yeah. There you go. So, of course, at the end of it all, right, it's got to go to somebody because we don't just let properties don't exist. And so it's either going to revert, if we didn't name anybody, back to the grantor, the grantor's heirs, or it's going to go to this third party that we name called the remainder man. Either is acceptable. This would be determined, as we just said with Bree, by the person who created this life estate. And remember, I told you, I'm going to show you a deed here in a little bit, where basically the purpose of a conventional life estate was to bypass probate. People who live in the house and own the house drafted up a deed naming their kids as remainder men subject to their conventional life estate, which means they will continue to own it so long as they are alive, but when they kick the bucket, their kids automatically become the owners. Nothing has to go through probate. It's easy. So there's reasons people do this.